You know, we've had presentations, or you could say we're like going to a fine 4-star Michelin restaurant this month. Welcome to Burger King. All right. So back then, way back when Gary had, well, what is going on here?
How about the slider over on the right?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. There. All right. Gary had asked last month if ham radio led us to electronics. In my case, I guess electronics led me to ham radio. When I was pretty young, my mother must have noticed that I kept fooling around with the tube testers in the drugstores, and when our old radio finally died, I tore it all apart, and somehow she got me a subscription to Popular Electronics. First issue I got had a DX20 on it. Oh, that's interesting. I looked around. Anyway, I was walking through Dayton's when I was pretty young, and they had this over there, this crystal radio from Japan, and this is the other one I saw, it's permeability tuned. It's a coil right down the middle. Steve had one like this.
I did too.
Yeah. Now the one I got I looked at it was $3. I had $3, amazingly enough. And I think it was just pink, but whatever. Worked pretty good. We lived about 10 miles from the KSTP antenna, so the stations I got were KSTP and KSTP. I plugged it into, yeah, but I listened to a lot of KSTP, and I tried it on everything I could find that was metal. I was surprised I didn't kill myself with the power outlet, but I didn't. Worked pretty good on the finger stop on the telephone. I slipped on a rollaway, and it worked on a steel frame on a rollaway. So anyway, I had some birthday money one time, so I bought this NC60. Although I wondered if I didn't have an NC59, because I don't think mine had a BFO. And I listened to a little bit of shortwave at the time, and it didn't have much of an antenna. Shortly after I got, and this is the era when we had where I would read things about 6146s and 2E2X6 and 807s, BC348s, and Q multipliers, and the good old megacycles. And people would talk about being rockbound. Well, I wasn't any interested in that. Then I was in high school, and lo and behold, I got interested in the opposite sex, so I kind of lost it. So we're
right there.
Yeah, all right. Yeah, all right. So, and I was in the service, and I got married and had kids and was pretty busy. So then, somewhere in the late 70s or 80s, I got into this one. So I picked up this NC155, and I actually got a novice license at first because there was a general at work, and he kind of wanted to get me into it. And so he gave me the novice test because they could do that back then. And I barely squeaked through the 5 words a minute, and maybe didn't. I don't know. He wanted me to get a license. And so I picked up this 10-tech. My dream was to be just a superior CW operator. Unfortunately, I went down to the FCC, and 13 wasn't going to happen. So I ended up, for the most part, with this Regency 2-meter rig. Crystal wasn't even, the synthesizers were just coming out, but I got this at a Hamfest. And I used a 1/4 wave vertical on the passenger side of my AMC Pacer. Probably radiated myself half to death, but it did work pretty good. So I got frustrated because I was not going to get further than technician. At the time, phone patches were big. I was able to use this to call my wife when I was on the way home sometimes. And Drake and Swan were the big deals. All right, so that's then. Now finally, I'm a lot older. And I had a little time, and it was like being Rip Van Winkle waking up. Because now I looked around at all these radios, have no idea how any of them work. I read some good reviews on the Zygu, and it was reasonably cheap to find out if I could even use it. So I got that, discovered, well, it's got 17 buttons, 2 selection knobs. You reverse your selections in many different ways, sometimes the same way you got there, sometimes not. And I've got like 5 manuals. Everybody in the world has written a manual for it. Radio Oddity wrote one, and some other places write one, and a lot of them will tell you how to get into something and then not mention how you get out of it. And the first one, I think I mentioned it, mine blew up, and the first one I had this mini Tamiya connector. Turns out to be a standard Molex connector, but if I would not have gotten one from Ham Radio Outlet, I got an extension, because I bought what I thought were the right connectors, but no, it was the wrong gender, because the pins can be either gender and fit in the same housing. So I thought I had the right one, but no, I didn't. So I got that. The new ones that they have now come with Anderson Power Pole, which is a much better idea. When that blew up, I got this Yaesu, and that worked well enough. I'm trying to get that going on HF again. The good news about that is that I can also pick up the Menards net on it quite well. It really is a nice radio. But it has 2 function modes. 14 are what they call simple, and 50 are their full modes, and they're... Huh?
A lot of menus.
Oh, God. Yeah. And it has 100 channels that you can set up. When I first got it, before I did a reset, I couldn't find it. Well, they allow you to make groups or something, and so only about 4 channels would show up until you get into it and you reset it all, and so it works good. But so not to mention other things that were strange for me: WSJTX, Whisper, FT8, remote stations, and logging, QRZ. These are all things I had to learn about. I didn't know anything about. So, all right, see if we can find this again. So finally, I had no real concept, but I wasn't digital. I wasn't getting anywhere with sideband, and I could not do any code, and I didn't hear that much of it. I heard that Whisper might tell me a little bit about propagation, and so most YouTubes I looked at assumed that you knew quite a bit more than I did, but I finally, when I got JTX, I downloaded JTX, and when you fire up JTX, the first thing it wants to do until you get it set up is error out and crash. Unless you do it just right, and then it'll stay up till you get it thing. But I found this place called Ham Radio Tube, and they did Glossora, but it had a demo with a G90. And it described using Digirig for which is a little box like that does the stereo cat commands and the audio. So that made life a lot easier. But I got that, and at first it wouldn't work. Well, then I found out, of course, it's USB. It needs a driver that I didn't have, but it's apparently pretty common. It took me a while to figure that out. And it took a while to sort out which audio was which, because when they talk about it, JTX talks about it from the computer's point of view, and your radio talks about it from the radio point of view, so I had to figure it all out. And there's also about 3 places to set audio levels. You can set it on the radio, you set it on your computer, and you can set it in JTX for both transmit and receive. So you set them all, and to get them just right. And they tell you to set the transmit level so that it works with your ALC, and I found out that the Zygu ALC works backwards for most of them, but I got it to work finally.
What do you mean backwards?
You want it to be closer to 100%. Well, if you put it on 100%, it goes down. Yeah, it's just strange. I figured it out, and it works now. And I forgot.
Yeah, the way I've been running mine lately is I run the RF gain on the second selector knob. And so on the input side, I dial the RF gain back and forth and watch the little receive meter on the software until it's out of the red. And on the transmit side, I drop the transmit power and I look at the ALC number. But it changes it by band too, depending on my antenna. At least. So it's
it was intriguing, as they say.
The one thing I really like about the G90 is the tuner. The tuner is really pretty easy to use, and it does a good job of tuning a wide variety of different antennas. So.
Anyway, so where to go next? Forum suggested that FT8 was a big dog, and I think it pretty much is. Just about the only game in town. It still seems pretty impersonal to me, but that's what it is. And I understand the reason. So I fumbled around with that and got it configured. And cat control was failing on me. I was trying to set up to check the serial commands to see what was going on. Then I saw another ham radio tube, and the guy talks about FLDigi, which is a little piece of software. That there's other stuff called ham radio outlet or ham radio something. Ham radio lib, I think. Library, maybe. I can't. There's several pieces of software. And what it does is it takes the JTX commands, and it just does a better job from what I can tell with the serials of your receiver, your transceiver. That made it a lot better. And so I was still confused because I looked at the screen, and every time I saw one on YouTube, they had all the automated messages in there. Well, you get them after you make your first contact. They don't show up until you actually use them. So I finally got a contact, and hallelujah, and then there they were. So out of all that, I have a few comments. The signal processing is awesome. It just does amazing things. I've gotten reports where they list me at minus 24 dB. Now they claim they die at minus 21, but I've gotten more than one at minus 24, which is kind of impressive. And I wish they would license their core part of it and have some other people develop the user interface, because to my mind, it's just a little clunky. It pretty much does function, but I often find, that's why it didn't work. I didn't do that. And they could require, developers to follow some rules. They make a big thing about no automatic QSOs, and I find out, well, the FCC does too, as long as they still care about it. And I wish one more thing. I wish that and I had proposed this at EHAM, and one guy threw rocks at me. I thought, if in your initial message, you're limited to all these characters, but if there was one message that said, all right, I want to put in a couple extra messages. I want to, we'll just have a couple extra ones between the first and the last, because right now it goes, they call you, you call CQ, somebody says, yeah, you answer them, you give them a signal report, they give you a signal report, and you're done. Because they send theirs RRR, and you send 73, and it's all gone. And if you could put, if you put one or two other ones, hi, I'm Harry, hi, I'm Bob, I'm running a dipole, yeah, so am I, and stuff. In just short messages that were like that. I know why they want it so quick, because you often, depending on the propagation, you often lose a signal quick. They talk about meteor scatter, and I don't know that I've seen that, but I've seen some quick losses. And you could pass that out, and somebody will come back to you. They would say whether they agreed or disagreed to the option, but I don't know. I don't think it's ever going to get to that point. I wish it would. So now I'll talk about a thing that I knew almost nothing about before, and I know slightly more now. I have a little bit of experience. Get up. So I got my mangled dipole up. I've showed little things several times about how I managed to just string wire on my balcony and make a 20-meter dipole. Length seemed okay. I have several 90-degree bends, and it's angled all around. I'm not entering any QST design competitions anytime soon. SWR was somewhat under 2 to 1. It wasn't as good as I wanted it to be. And I built that meter that measures the RFI in your coax, and it was higher than I wished it was. I wasn't sure how high it was, but it looked. So I tried just using, I read all these things. Yeah, you can use any kind of a choke and it'll work just as good as a balance. So I wound one around one of those clip-on cores I had, and it was an epic failure. So I asked Mert where to get some supplies, what to do, and he said he had some parts. I went over there, and so he hands me this balance. He wound one up for me.
Sounds like Mark.
Yeah. Here you go. Thanks. And I looked at it, and it didn't look like any other one because he twisted the wires together. He had magnet wire, and he used them all in the twisted pair. He said, that works better. I believe you. I wasn't sure because I had read about, I think, type 31 cores and type 43 cores. And he says, this is a 61. Oh, all right. Maybe it'll work. Well, SWR looked good right at the antenna. At the end of the coax, it's about 1 to 1. The RFI is way down. Well, how about that? Apparently a balance that can do you some good. This was choke. It was a choke. I'm working and learning from my failures. I'm working with my MFJ apartment dwellers antenna, which I have other words for, but I did get it to work with the antenna tuner. I will probably be stuck. I don't know. I'm going to try. I tried a choke balance, that was a fail, and I tried a balance on my. I'm trying to come up with an end-fed random length that should be in the ballpark. You read about these things, and there are slots where they claim you can make a random length antenna. You can run it somewhere between 35 and 40 feet. You can run it there's just locations because you don't want it to be resonant on anywhere that you're going to operate. So I don't know. I got a small start last year, and it got cold, and I quit. I made a balance that didn't work out the way I wanted to, but I think I had an end-fed random should have high impedance. Mine does not necessarily, so I need something different. And I'll talk about that a little more. So that's where I am with that stuff. But then, all right. Yeah. God. All right. So, here's the balance. I know that a voltage balance is supposed to balance voltage at the end of the terminals, and that's the end of my knowledge, and I've heard it's harder to use than the other kind, so I stopped paying any attention to it. So then the current, which is on a 1 to 1, it is a choke, and that's the main reason it's used is a choke. But if you need an end-to-end transformer, which is what it is, you have to wind something like this, and this is one of the things I've tried, and it took me a while to try and figure out. There was a guy that built one, and I tried to duplicate it, and I did for the most part. I use an FT140 core, and typically it's mounted on a toroidal ferrite core. They come in sizes FT140, FT240. The larger it is, the more power it can handle. Or you can stack them up and do it better that way. I put tape over mine, which is supposed to help keep it from nicking the wires. And material mix determines what goes on. Well, I tried this 43 and it fell apart when I was using it. It fell apart at the higher frequencies. So I screwed up the. Now, has winding types are supposed to support high temps because if things start to go bad, then it's going to get a little hot. People use Teflon. I think they used to use silver-plated wire, but I don't think anybody can afford that these days. And they use tin-plated wire. Use coax. Use magnet wire. There's several winding styles. Depending what you're doing, you can use bifilar, trifilar. You can use the Mert Mellis twisted pair method, and you can wind it on each side, and I haven't seen one like that. So, that's so. This is just a quick schematic of the two types. Here's the voltage. Here's the current. All right. That's as much as I know. I know this works. I know this is too hard for me. You guys can make one work. Good for you. So when you get them, I talked about this. And so this is the multiple one. You can run that. Yeah, you can make this do an impedance transformation. It does not have, apparently does not have any choking ability at that point. And Paul, I know you wound one for Chuck, so you must be an expert on them.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, you made a 49-to-1 balance for him, at least.
Oh,
Yeah. Memory isn't completely gone yet.
Keep it telling me these words.
I'm working on it, but it's not completely gone. So, all right. So then, what they usually do, what these are supposed to usually do is decrease the impedance from end feds. So then you get the antenna here, and so it comes out that your input is coming to here, and your impedance there will be less than it is. It works like an auto transformer, and that's a good thing. What you usually do. Turns out, of course, you can do it the other way. If you do it this way, where you put the coax on over there, and you put the antenna in this, you will actually have an increased impedance. And there are situations where I think I need this. So that works out for me. And the last thing I'm going to show you is just something that I did run across because I only saw this once. And that was, somebody did wind one like this. That's the only one I've ever seen wound like that. Apparently it works. What I know, I wound it on each side. So, well, I know, like I said, a little more than I did. I'm hoping to learn a lot more this year as it warms up and I can do some experiments with this stuff. It's a lot of fun trying to figure out. I have learned to use the nano to try and characterize the cores a little bit. You use the through function in the nano, you can see a lot of interesting things. Someday I may understand them. Oh.
How big is your balcony?
It's 12 by 6.
Yeah, it's not very big.
No.
Are you high up off the ground?
I'm on the second floor, which is not too high, but FT8, to show you the power of FT8, when it was really hot when I first started, and FT8 was really smoking, I have 33 countries, and I have, right now I'm over 400 contacts. I don't work it that hard. I used to get Europe used to come pounding in on 20. It does not anymore. But recently I hooked up my, I just set it to 15 and used my 20 meter to see what came in, and it 15 is really high. Yeah, I don't get that with the MFJ, but I get that, just hooking up to that, which is, that longer wire. So that's it. So yeah, I don't have a lot. I'm trying to get what I can, and I can get contacts. So I would like to get somewhere, and I would like to learn code, but I don't know if my personality allows me to learn code. I know the letters, and I've tried, but practice doesn't sit well with me with that. And I no longer want it as much as I once did, So that's it. That's all I got to say. Thank you for not throwing things.